There's no Antifa. This is an entirely imaginary organization. There is not an Antifa.
Like, I don't even know what Antifa is. There is no group.
It's not even like far-right groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. Compared to right-wing extremists, Antifa-linked violence is rare and limited.
It isn't an organization. It is in many ways mythology.
It's not like the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, sort of defined terrorist organizations with leadership that leads violence.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
Proved over and over again.
Wrong.
So this is a really big deal. It's historic, as a matter of fact, because today marks the first time ever that domestic terrorism charges have officially been brought in a formal legal indictment against members of Antifa. Of course, the idea of designating Antifa a domestic terrorist organization is not new. It's been floated all the way back to Trump 1. A couple of weeks ago, Trump said he was indeed going to be moving forward and doing it, but this is the proof of finally putting that pen to paper. As you can see first on Fox, the DOJ has now brought its first ever Antifa-related terrorism charges against the perpetrators of the Texas ICE attack back on January 4th of this year. We'll tell you about it. We'll tell you about those implications as well as what Antifa is planning next, because if you're at all curious whether they are looking to infiltrate and turn this weekend's upcoming No Kings protest into violence, you would of course be correct, and we'll review some of the details we've actually talked about in the past in terms of the Antifa organizations and networks across this country, and how even this DOJ indictment does seem to name co-conspirators and in some cases even collaborators with the federal government, which first of all not only suggests, yes, that this is not just an idea we are talking about, there's absolutely an organized nature to Antifa, but secondly, the fact that indeed, because of this kind of new, broader scope that we are persecuting and prosecuting Antifa members under, that people who are connected to this, that are funding this, that are involved basically in the network can indeed be brought under legal justice, which is also further very important. So we'll get into it, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is not only the best way to support our videos, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, let us read you the indictment, because I think the details here are actually very important in terms of, again, the implications of what this means. So, this is, of course, referring to the fact that late at night on the 4th of July, 2025, some of you may remember this, a North Texas Antifa cell of at least 11 operatives clad in black and donning masks, some of whom were wearing body armor and carrying firearms, attacked the Prairieland Detention Center in Alvarado, Texas. Again, Democrats claim this is just an idea. Clearly, it might have just been random violence. Surely these 11 Antifa members dressed in black blocs certainly were not collaborating together. There's no organized nature, guys. These are just people protesting against fascism, which of course equates to committing acts of domestic terrorism. But according to the Democrat Party, that is of course protected by free speech, Anyways, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security was using Prairieland to house illegal aliens awaiting that deportation. Members of the Antifa cell began shooting fireworks toward the facility and vandalizing vehicles and a guard shed. Alarmed at the presence of people near the facility late at night, DHS correctional officers inside the facility went outside to investigate. Other DHS personnel called local police for assistance. Within minutes, an officer from the Alvarado Police Department arrived on scene, stepped out of his cruiser, and began issuing commands to a black-clad figure running towards another black-clad figure holding a rifle. These were ideas holding rifles, ladies and gentlemen. One Antifa member, co-conspirator 1, yelled, quote, "Get to the rifles." Peaceful protester. These are no kings, though. Don't you know, right? Democrats constantly, by the way, make such open and naked endorsements of everything happening outside of ICE facilities. So just keep in mind, right? The very rhetoric you've heard by Karen Bass, like the very next week against ICE, or now JB Pritzker saying, it's the fault of ICE. These are peaceful protesters you're going after. They're doing it all with the knowledge that this type of violence is happening. Okay, don't pretend like they're just simply ignorant or choosing to ignore it. No, of course, they know exactly what they're egging on. Hence why I have so often said there is a close relationship between the Democrat Party and Antifa. I don't care if the Democrats present themselves as moderate, pro-democracy neoliberals, and Antifa, as we've established time and time again, are violent, militant, revolutionary communists. That is the entire history and origins of anti-fascist action ever since 1930s Germany. But no, of course, they're working one and the same, hence why they constantly protect each other. Hence why, by the way, you would never see the idea of these people being charged as domestic terrorists happen under a Biden or any Democrat administration, obviously. So anyways, seconds later, Conspirator 1 opened fire on the officers, striking the Alvarado police officer in the neck area as the unarmed correctional officers ducked and ran for cover. Don't know why they were unarmed exactly, by the way. This is obviously a serious situation, but the wounded officer fell to the ground but was able to return a few shots. Co-conspirator 1 continued to fire additional rounds until his rifle jammed, so clearly just trying to maniacally kill people. The attackers then left the scene. Peaceful protest, by the way. Police arrested most of the Antifa cell shortly after the attack, many near the scene of the attack, including Zachary Evans. Police arrested Cameron Arnold the following day. But here's where it gets really interesting. Again, talking about the specific domestic terrorism charges and the way they're going to finally start prosecuting these people, which should have been happening the entire time. And again, the organized nature of Antifa. These are not ideas. It is not some loosely organized group of protesters. No, again, violent communist terrorists collaborating together. The Antifa cell, the indictment reads. And again, the significance is that it's not just us making videos about it, as we've been explaining, because nothing, if you watch the content, should be new about this information to you. But no, it's about the fact that now in the legal system, right, in the indictment, in the court, this is now how the federal government in the federal court system is officially interpreting what Antifa really is. That's why it's historic. Okay, so let's read. Antifa is a militant enterprise made up of networks of individuals and small groups primarily ascribing to a revolutionary anarchist or autonomous Marxist ideology, what have I been saying in every single video, by the way, which explicitly calls for the overthrow of the United States government, yes, terrorists and insurrectionists, law enforcement authorities, and the system of law. Which is all true. Antifa adherents have espoused insurrection. Important word, right? We're using that word again, not just colloquially, but again, in legal filings, and advocated violence to affect the policy and conduct of the U.S. government by intimidation and coercion. Beginning in 2025, Antifa adherents have increasingly targeted agents and facilities related to DHS's ICE enforcement in opposition to ICE's deportation actions and the U.S. government's policy on the removal of illegal aliens. Now, as Fisher King here points out quite well, and this basically sums up what we're saying, right? This indictment of an Antifa cell in Texas is an interesting read and puts a stake through the heart of this idea that this is a quote-unquote idea and not an organization. In this attack, they shot a police officer in the neck who was responding to their armed assault on a DHS facility. Some highlights. The cell in question was in possession of over 50 firearms. 50 guns, guys, acquired over time for use in attacks, including high-power rifles with binary triggers that allowed for more rapid fire. So interestingly, it's okay for people that the Democrats support to violate ATF rules and, modify their weapons like this. But, you do that in your own home, right? You're a terrorist, obviously, but not the actual terrorist. Anyways, the group coordinated its activities using an encrypted messaging app. They had group chats to organize, again, not just some random protests that sporadically sprung up, right? But in the attack that led to the shooting of the officer, they exchanged details for days, sending each other maps, agreeing on which of the 50 firearms to bring, etc. They made sure to bring multiple rifles because, quote, cops are not prepared for more than one rifle, so they back off. By the way, we did cover this on the channel for the record, but notice how this was barely a news story, nationally speaking. Maybe a couple of headlines, shooting at ICE facility, they moved on. You're learning about this, what happened on July 4th, and you can clearly see, indeed, This was a major coordinated terrorist attack, right, by left-wing militants. But of course, right, nothing to be said about it. If this was a far-right extremist, it'd be the biggest story in America, because it is a serious attack, right? But anyways, they organized a staging house where some of them stayed before the attack. Okay. What is encouraging, though, is that the indictment refers to unnamed co-conspirators, meaning a couple people flipped and are cooperating with the government, basically to get a plea deal here. But why is that important? Because that gives us more information, right, as to going after more and more Antifa cells. This is basically the same exact strategy that is used to break up organizations like the Mafia or even historically the KKK. This is what the feds do. And so now we're not treating Antifa with some kid's gloves where it's like, oh, we're going to send you to jail for 30 days or even 30 minutes for assault. No, we're treating this seriously as a criminal and ultimately terrorist organization. So hopefully the government gets better at this and starts moving up the ladder to figure out what entities organize the cells on a higher level, where the funding is coming from, etc. So we'll get into that in a second, but I'd just like to point out and recap some details we actually talked about in our last video on Antifa. By the way, feel free to go check it out if you want to learn more about how the organization, and it is an organization of Antifa, actually works. But just as some examples, as Andy No has pointed out this week, right? Who is the main Antifa leader in the U.S.? 2.5 years ago, I reported on who is behind the Torch Antifa Network, a violent group of Antifa cells that includes Portland's Rose City Antifa. By the way, you look up Rose City Antifa. They have a website. Formerly, they had a donation page. We covered actually how they're basically in hiding right now because they're scared of the federal government going after them. So they're trying to go dark and go black. And maybe that is also part of the reason why, the Portland situation has not gotten as crazy as it did back in 2020, because again, these people are in hiding. But of course, how could that be the case if they don't even exist, right? You mean to tell me there's chartered members of Antifa, right? And yes, this group, the Torch Antifa Network, sponsors a bunch of chapters, including the nation's most infamous chapter, Rose City Antifa. By the way, there's also Antifa International that we talked about in the other video that, does sponsor other networks across the country. So obviously this stuff is all organized. And just because they are kind of covert about it, just because they do have good operation security, right, OPSEC, that is intentionally meant to hide some of their members, doesn't mean they don't have members, doesn't mean it's not an organization. As a matter of fact, I would argue that actually further proves the very criminal and terroristic nature of this, given the way that they operate. But of course, we're just going to continue to be told none of this is real. Anyways, Daryl Lamont Jenkins, who owned the Torch Antifa website, runs One People's Project, which is a 501c3, right? A nonprofit charity that solicits charitable donations to provide material aid to Antifa. A lawsuit uncovered his nonprofit owned the Torch Antifa website. And by the way, Antifa International, another group we have covered, fundraised for his legal defense. On a similar note, you look at the fact that they've actually have chapters across the country. Yes, even held conferences and events, guys, in past years, right? And yeah, this includes the Denver, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Portland, Chicago, Bay Area, many other places. And, it's very interesting because, of course, when you tie that back to what you're currently seeing right now in Portland and the fact that, as one example, Portland Antifa protesters receive an entire U-Haul full of gear, that there's a network behind this, there's funding. You have to be asking questions. Where is some of this stuff coming from, right?
You have all this stuff that's getting dropped off right here. You have all of the inflatables as well that the people have been protesting in. A little strange, they have a U-Haul shipment full of all of the stuff that's apparently been taken away. So stuff's been coming in. There's still protesters out right now. It's like 4 p.m. right now, I believe. And the protesters are starting to show up here to the ICE facility in Portland.
Right, so again, heavily coordinated, heavily organized. Isn't it so funny, by the way, how throughout so much of history, the supposed grassroots left of people just organizing is not so grassroots. It's kind of entirely propped up in AstroTurf. But of course, despite all of this, despite the evidence we provide time and time again, what are we still told by liberal Democrat morons like Jimmy Kimmel? Oh, Antifa doesn't exist, and MAGA are obviously the real domestic terrorists. As a matter of fact, take a listen to a very recent monologue of his. So let's check it out.
Antifa is just short for anti-fascist. It's not a club you can join. There are no membership dues, but they have matching signs. Okay, well, I guess we better round up these domestic terrorists, too. They look pretty matching to me. Listen, I'm going to tell you this. Spread it around. There's no chaos in Portland. None. There is no chaos in Chicago. There was no chaos in Los Angeles. They're pretending there's chaos as a pretense for a military takeover. But I'm open-minded. If there is chaos in these cities Trump calls hellholes, let's see it and decide if something needs to be done about it.
Hey, Sinclair Media Group and all the people who brought him back on the air. Are you paying attention to the blatant, first of all, misinformation? There's no chaos in Portland. Really, like, not even violence. There's no chaos. Everything's perfectly orderly. Really? You know, there's no chaos in Chicago. There's no chaos in Los Angeles. Okay. Infamous videos of chaos even being shown by the local news. Even the police chief admitted that the situation was out of hand and the National Guard did a lot in helping to quell the situation. But there was no chaos. It was all, of course, perfectly peaceful. And then furthermore, despite however much evidence we provide them, that again, first of all, Antifa is not short for anti-fascist or anti-fascism. It is short for anti-fascist action, which again is the official name of a communist militant, paramilitary group that was, of course, founded back in late 1920s and early 1930s Germany by the KPD. You know what KPD is short for? Communist Party of Deutschland, aka Communist Party of Germany. We've gone over this information time and time again. I'm not going to repeat it once more. But, again, that's where it all started, right? A communist militant organization. More than just anti-fascist. Yes, they call themselves certain things in the same way that the Marxists of today call themselves anti-racist, and therefore, if you don't support the anti-racist, then you must be a racist. Like, no, that's not how it works, right? That is dialectic semantic games that communists so often play. But again, you look at the modern, state of these people and what they're doing. What is Antifa today? Well, again, as the legal indictment points out, it is also furthermore, still today, Marxist insurrection and militancy, and no matter how much proof we provide to these people, indeed that they are organized, and there's even like 501c3s and stuff, and donation websites, groups, leaders, people that are running it, they'll just tell us it's just an idea. Okay. I don't know. At what point do we have to suggest that maybe Jimmy Kimmel's in on it? I'm just saying. I don't know. Anyways, that said, of course, you're probably well familiar too with the fact that this Saturday is the upcoming No Kings protest. Okay, what is this, the third one they've done? I'm not exactly sure. But of course, right, a lot of liberals and a lot of leftists have been trying to attack the Republicans for talking about this. They said, the Republicans are scared of No Kings. They're trying to say it's violent, it's perfectly peaceful. Well, what if I told you, as you probably expect, there's plenty of reason to believe that No Kings will end up in violence this Saturday because, as Andy No further points out, CrimethInc, which is one of the largest and most influential violent Antifa organizing sites, has released a call to action for anarchist communist extremists to infiltrate the No Kings protest on October 18th. Oh, yeah. The last No Kings protest was marred by deadly violence when one of the volunteer peacekeepers fired upon an armed far-left man, thinking the man was a MAGA threat who was also there for security. The liberal peacekeeper shot and killed an innocent bystander. No one has been charged. Wait, what? What? Okay, no one's been charged after people are shooting at each other. Antifa often embeds, as you are well familiar, in larger liberal protests, using the crowd as human shields to commit vandalism or violence, and then blend back in to evade detection. Not a surprise. We've seen this happen time and time again. But they want us to be more freaked out about some group chat between young Republicans that has nothing to do even with the Republican Party, I should say, itself. Whereas, you look at, for instance, a sitting Democrat candidate fantasizing about killing, Republican children. And of course, even at these prominent Democrat endorsed events like No Kings, we're just embedding Antifa in large liberal protests to use them as shields to commit violence. By the way, you think the liberals have a problem with that? As I so often point out, right? Or the liberals doing an aggressive push right now to say, hey, Antifa, stay out of our movement. We don't want anything to do with you. No. They're running cover, they're supporting, they're endorsing it. Okay, they're defending it like Jimmy Kimmel saying Antifa, that doesn't even exist, okay, while this all happens. So, again, the distance between the liberals and the violent anarcho-communists is not actually that different, as we tell you time and time again. We've actually pointed out before as well, by the way, how at many of these, anti-Trump protests, you will see these orange signs from a site called refusefascism.org. As a matter of fact, that refusefascism.org, people usually lead these protests themselves. And we pointed out, refusefascism.org is owned by the American Communist Party, right? So, like, almost all the Democrat protests you see in the streets are being led by the American Communist Party. And of course, they don't care. They join in on them. Why? Because these people who claim to be liberals or moderate Democrats actually do feel the same exact way at the end of the day. Anyways, when police make arrests or use crowd control tools, lying journalists say that peaceful protesters are being arrested. So true, by the way. Also, as I've been pointing out, this is a common left-wing tactic that goes back many decades throughout history, right? Even some of the protest movements you learned about in school in the 1960s that were supposedly peaceful, you will see the same exact story, right? Left-wingers agitate, police make arrests or tear gas or something, and they claim what? The authoritarians are arresting peaceful protesters. The rabbit hole there goes deep, and they're using the same tactics today. Anyways, Antifa also uses these events to recruit and radicalize people by distributing texts or inviting attendees to training events or after-action meetings. By the way, same way that the Communist Party USA, who are more, to my understanding, like Stalinists than anarcho-communists like Antifa, there's different groups, okay? But they do the same thing, right? Because all of their signs that they're showing to Democrat voters say refusefascism.org. Democrats say, oh, I'm perfectly fine with refusing fascism. They go there. It's a link to what? The American Communist Party. So same exact thing, right? They're literally trying to radicalize the left. And does the left push back? Do they condemn these people? No, absolutely not, right? You know, as much as you guys want to talk about a group chat, which, by the way, like, Republicans are not saying we support, how about you can make an equivalency when the KKK shows up to a conservative protest and then they're not condemned, like they're allowed and they say, hey, go commit violence and we'll actually protect you. Then we can make a moral equivalency, right? When a Republican candidate fantasizes about killing, Democrat children, then we can have a moral equivalency. Unless you're going to go there, then, that is just ridiculous. Anyways, Antifa are, of course, desperate to garner more mainstream support after President Trump announced he intends to dismantle their terror cells. And so now they're just trying to hide innocently within the ranks of the Democrat Party. By the way, I would argue Democrats, of course, who shelter these people or defend these people should also be seen as co-conspirators. Nonetheless, in response, just today, Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced he will be surging National Guard and law enforcement into Austin, Texas for the planned left-wing Antifa protests, saying, and I quote, anyone destroying property or committing acts of violence will be swiftly arrested. Texas will not tolerate chaos. Furthermore, you are seeing at least the GOP Senate pretend that they're going along with the current Trump push, because this week, Senator Ted Cruz said the following, quote, there is considerable evidence that George Soros and his network are funding the No Kings rallies. That's exactly why I've introduced the Stop Funders Act. It allows law enforcement to prosecute those funding acts of political violence. Now, I gotta say, that's good news and that's a good start. Will it actually make it out of committee? Right, is the Republican Senate actually going to pass it? I have my serious doubts. They might use the excuse, oh, this falls under the filibuster, so we can't do it. But again, assuming this is real and not performative, I would say it's a good thing. But of course, with the senators, as usual, trust but verify.
Now, I will say one of the most important things President Trump has done recently is he has pledged that he's going to go after Antifa. And what I've been urging is follow the money, cut off the money. And you look at this No Kings rally, and there's considerable evidence that George Soros and his network is behind funding these rallies, which may well be riots all across the country. And Soros is writing the check. And so I've introduced legislation called the Stop Funders Act that would add rioting to the list of predicate offenses for RICO. Why is that? Because it would let the Department of Justice use RICO, racketeering, to prosecute the money that is funding the anti-Semitic protests on campuses, the pro-open border protest in L.A. and other cities, and these No King protests. Anyone that is supporting rioting and violence, it lets you go after the money. And I'll tell you, there are more than 200 left-wing groups behind these No Kings rallies this weekend. They deliberately are blind to what each of the others are doing. That's part of how they avoid accountability. RICO is designed for precisely that sort of criminal enterprise. And so I believe the Senate, we ought to take up and vote on and pass our Stop Funders legislation. And I've urged both Pam Bondi at DOJ and Kash Patel at FBI, follow the money and prosecute those who are writing checks funding acts of violence, political violence or otherwise, across the country.
Well, there you go. That's exactly what I've been saying for weeks, right? You need RICO charges against this entire network and Ted Cruz is right about that. You know, Democrats have this easy game where they can say it doesn't exist simply because it is well hidden, right? They are decentralized, as you can see. They operate in these like little cells separately of each other. But again, you follow the money, you trace it all the way back. This is basically one big enterprise. Again, they operate very similar to the mafia and other groups that RICO was designed to go after, right? You have all these little like shell companies, 501c3s, NGOs, you know, rabbit holes of different stuff. These people claim they're not associated with those people, but they're ultimately the same. That is why, right? You absolutely need this again. My faith, my confidence is not high in our Republican Senate to really do something about it, but I think we ought to be putting maximum pressure as the base and saying, no, indeed, like this is exactly what we want. This is what we need. This is what we voted for. And if you can successfully bring down this terror network and group of NGOs, I mean, shoot, who knows? I mean, that might freaking like literally save the entire country. I don't want to be exaggeratory about it. But again, when you look how deep this goes, and a lot of that same money was funding the migrant invasion and a lot of the other protest movements of the left and, you know, the Democrat Party, a ultimately, you know, organization that's working with the paramilitary communists, further probably implicated in a lot of it, that could be big. That could be big. Right. And then without fake astroturfed militancy and like, you know, these people funding all this stuff, what would the left wing have in America? Because they're not grassroots, right? They don't genuinely have the support of the people. I don't know. With that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.